And we move now to Germany and Chancellor Angela Merkel's weekend warning over widespread and underreported anti-Semitism. Now, speaking in the lead up to the International Holocaust Remembrance Day on Wednesday, Merkel called for intensive action against anti-Semitism and urged particular vigilance when dealing with young people from countries, quote, where hatred of Israel and anti-Semitism is widespread. Now, though Merkel didn't say it explicitly, many have taken her words to refer to the hundreds of thousands of migrants from Muslim countries that entered Germany this year. The following report has the story.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel rang alarm bells over the prevalence of anti-Semitism this week, speaking during her weekly podcast. Discussing an exhibition she will open Monday, entitled Art of the Holocaust, she made clear how anti-Semitism doesn't fit in the German society.
One must set clear limits to the war on anti-Semitism. One can try to argue about this more and more, but it must also be clear this has no place in our society.
The German Chancellor is severely concerned by what she described as a phenomenon, but is determined to act.
Unfortunately, anti-Semitism is more widespread than we thought, than we imagined, and this is why we must tackle it intensively. This is why we must also take into account the concerns of the President of the Central Council of Jews in Germany and say, we must deal with this, also with the young people with backgrounds from lands where hatred of Israel and hatred of Jews is common.
Germany welcomed some 1.1 million asylum seekers in 2015, many fleeing war and persecution in Syria, Iraq and Afghanistan. In the past, Merkel has made attempts to stem the flow of Germany's anti-Semitism. Until now, sources show a drop in anti-Semitic crimes within the last year, but with the amount of migrants arriving in Europe, the number of anti-Semitic incidences may start to rise. Perhaps decisive action can't come soon enough.
And we are joined now via Skype by the Jerusalem Post Berlin correspondent, as well as fellow at the Foundation for Defense and Democracy, Benjamin Wienthal. Thank you very much for being with us this morning.
Thanks for having me.
So in recent months, what has life been like for German Jews?
Well, the waves of refugees is certainly going to contribute to a spike in anti-Semitism. Many of these refugees come from Muslim-majority countries that are steeped in hatred of Israel and Jews. I think the other problem is Chancellor Merkel's comments were encouraging to hear that she recognizes how deeply anchored anti-Semitism is in Germany, but at the same time, what we're seeing is government-sponsored BDS activities. For example, sandwiched between the International Holocaust Remembrance Day are two events in Germany, one in the city of Bremen, in a city-owned building that will sponsor or advocate BDS and hatred of Israel. And then the day after International Holocaust Remembrance Day in Munich, the mayor of Munich will allow an anti-Israel event to take place in a city building. So there's a disconnect between Merkel's rhetoric and what's happening on the local and regional level in terms of BDS activity. And of course, Merkel, one must remember, advocates and supports the labeling of Israeli products from the disputed territories. All of these factors, from my perspective, give a shot into the arm of anti-Israeli activists and anti-Semitic groups in Germany.
And also, many are criticizing her recently with regards to words versus actions, especially with regard to the sexual assaults on New Year's Eve that were rampant. So this seems to be an issue revolving around her as now that she comes to grips with the arrival of so many migrants from the Middle East.
Correct. I mean, Germany's response to the sustained sexual assault by refugees on women in Cologne and other German cities has been to issue cartoons and diagrams encouraging refugees not to assault women, for example, in public swimming pools and discos and other public events. So it's become a running joke on social media when you look at Germany's response.
I see. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Benny Wienthal. And joining us on the phone is also Wilhelm Roth, founder and CEO at Israel Europe Freedom Center. Thank you for being with us this morning, Wilhelm.
Good morning. Great to be with you.
So will we see now a rise of German Jews making aliyah or immigrating to Israel amidst all these reports?
I actually don't think so. Usually when we look at German Jews, the few that are out there, usually they feel comfortable, either they're fully integrated into German society, they have usually very comfortable jobs, so most likely they will stay in Germany. If we're looking for a trend for Aliyah, it might be from Israelis who lived in Germany or went to Germany for war, and with all the rise of the old anti-Semitism from the Middle East coming and blending with the old anti-Semitism of Europe, they might think twice and get back to Israel.
And I want to get your take on anti-Semitism within Germany. It's on the rise, but how would that compare with France?
Pardon?
How would it compare with France, the anti-Semitism in Germany at this point?
I think that the anti-Semitism in Germany, if we look at the anti-Semitism in Germany, at least from the end of World War II to this day, anti-Semitism, the classic one that we know of, is regarded as ignorant. And in German society, being ignorant is very shameful. So usually when you look at German anti-Semitism, it comes from a very radical 1 to 3% of German society. Now, usually they're also very, very violent, so they're not as strong as in France. In France, for example, racism hasn't, in a way, stopped because France didn't comply with the Nazis as other regimes. They don't have the Hitler logo with them. So the hardcore Catholic, mainly Catholic anti-Semitism is still, it's not even popular, but it's very much rampant in France.
I see. Well, Wilhelm T. Roth, thank you very much for joining us this morning. And coming up next, after a 14-year break, Agent Mulder and Agent Scully are back on the X-Files. We'll talk all about it, but first let's hear some more of this morning's headlines.